Coby White has been predicted to be the Chicago Bulls' leading scorer in 2024-25. We're going to talk about why that could be and could not be the case, depending on how a few things shake out. Can Zach LaVine actually increase his trade value into the 2024-25 season? And then lastly, we're going to look at some three-guard lineups with the Chicago Bulls using probably Josh Giddey, Coby White, and Zach LaVine as their starting 1, 2, and 3. We're going to look at some of the success and failures of three-guard lineups over the course of the recent NBA history. We're going to look at all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So, first of all, before the content, I do want to thank you guys for everyone who showed up to the live mailbag episode that I decided to do on the spur of the moment last night. First off, thank you for Steve-O and Big Kev holding it down for me on the daily episode while I was traveling, things like that. But I want to give a shout out to those guys for holding me down, but then came back, was sitting around, and was like, hey, I miss my people. And, I've been doing this show now for 3 years. We're at 1,185 straight days of content for the channel. And so it was like, when I don't do this show, even though it hasn't been that many days I haven't done, I miss it. So, I wanted to do a live mailbag, and we may actually do more of that. Now with the season starting, maybe not, but that may be something that maybe we add during the offseason since we don't get consistent live streams. Maybe we start doing consistent live call-in episodes during the live stream. Let me know down below what you guys think about that. The live call-ins had a little bit of a technical difficulty at the beginning of it, but I think it got it worked out now. But let me know what you guys think about that. But with that said, I want to get into this content for today. So Coby White was predicted to be the Chicago Bulls' leading scorer, and there are some things that definitely point towards him doing that. You look at what Coby White was last season for the Chicago Bulls. You guys know the numbers. We're not going to go over the numbers every single time we talk about Coby White, but he extended his game every single area by role, by output, by performance, by the stats. He increased his role every single place across the court for Coby White. And that was a really promising thing when you look at that for Coby. Coming into that, now with DeMar being gone, it's kind of natural that people would predict that Coby White's probably going to step into this and being the leading scorer, even though his role is changing, right? Moving from being the point guard to the starting two guard, with Josh Giddey being here. But considering Josh Giddey's playmaking ability, there are a lot of people that do look at it and say that, there's some people for sure that rightfully so are a little concerned, and we'll get into the reasons for concern over Coby White and how his scoring could maybe be negatively impacted by Josh Giddey being there. But with Josh Giddey not really being a scorer, but still a player that could put up some points, but his primary focus being playmaking, yeah, there's a huge possibility, especially if Coby White can grow off ball with the scoring ability that he could be, the Bulls' leading scorer. And really, who else is going to step into that? Zach LaVine is really the only other candidate when it really comes down to being the Bulls' leading scorer, I would think. Now, Coby's never averaged over 20 points per game. He was close last season, but he's never averaged over 20. We got Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, who have averaged over 20 over the course of their careers. But Vooch, it was clearly seeing this offense. He's not that guy. He's not going to average over 20 points, I don't think. And then you have Zach LaVine. Now, you do have some other cases, like Josh Giddey's been a player that has averaged 17 points or close to 17 points prior, but you don't necessarily see him taking that leap to maybe being the leading scorer and the leading playmaker. He may lead the team in usage, but maybe not be the leading scorer. Patrick Williams hasn't really shown anything in that ability that you expect to do that. And then, a player like Ayo Dosunmu coming off the bench, even if Lonzo Ball is, fully healthy and back to his old self, which he won't be the leading scorer. So there's a lot of room for Coby White to take that. Now, when you look at it, in the 2022-23 season, 9.8% of Coby White's field goal percent was pull-up three-pointers. And he only hit that at a 27.6% clip. Now, when you look at those same shots that he took in 2022-23, in 2023-24, 12.3% of his field goals were on pull-up threes. And he hit that at a 40.4% clip that actually puts him in near elite category as far as pull-up threes. Now, he is not going to be taking a lot of pull-up threes theoretically because he's going to have to learn to play off ball with Josh Giddey. So there is some worry about that kind of hurting Coby White. And we've talked about it. In catch and shoot opportunities, Coby White's like a 32% scorer, a shooter. That's not great. Now, he hasn't been asked to do a lot of catch and shoot things over the course of his career either. So there's those things that you can look at and say, well, much like he wasn't asked to have the scoring load that he had last season, maybe that he's going to be able to grow his game and being needed to do those things a little bit more in how the Bulls offense is evolving. So there's things definitely to put into that. The biggest thing when you look at Coby White and his chances of leading the Chicago Bulls in scoring comes down to a few things. A, Coby has to not only repeat what he did last year, but be a little bit better in it and in a different way. So that's definitely a question, right? Like, we've seen backcourts before where you move a guy who was on ball mostly to being more off ball, and it hasn't worked before. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the 3-guard lineup conversation. So anybody who has their pessimism about how well will that work as far as moving Coby White to the shooting guard, there's a natural doubt of that. Now, I've said before, it's not like Coby White was being the primary ball handler every single possession either down the stretch of games. DeMar was doing that. You're getting that now kind of same ball handling kind of responsibilities, but from Josh Giddey, who is an actual point guard and a better playmaker than DeMar DeRozan as far as with the passing aspect of it. And so that. And then you have to question of what Zach LaVine's role is going to be, and are the Bulls going to be looking to feature maybe more Zach LaVine so they can up his trade value? Is Zach going to be maybe a little bit more selfish to try to prove a point, right? I'm not saying that I expect those things to happen, but there are definitely questions when it comes down to that. And that's what you got to ask yourself, right? And so, especially when you look at the fact of like this thing working out between these three players being on the court at the same time, shout out to the live mailbag episode yesterday. Brandon Eljet brought up a great question in which he talked about like Zach LaVine, still being a huge part of that. And if Zach LaVine is more, and we've seen Zach LaVine at times over his NBA career be a solid passer, right? Now, I'm not saying he needs to, because we know that his ball handling and decision-making in the clutch can have its own issues and woes and things like that. But we've seen Zach LaVine be a willing passer and a solid passer, and that was with much lesser teammates. Now, if Zach LaVine comes into this situation, buys in, the ball's moving around a little bit more freely, if we get that Zach LaVine that is average 4.9, 4.2, 4.5 assists per game, and the players that are playing off ball are a little bit more impactful as well, then yeah, I do think that this offense can flow. And I'm not saying that it all hinges on Zach LaVine, but Zach LaVine could be a very important cog in this offense working kind of at this most optimal level, whatever that is, if he's playing smart and intelligently, limiting the turnovers. One thing that we don't talk about as well is how Zach LaVine's turnovers went up. Like, as his scoring went up, his turnovers went up hugely. And I guess some of that's expected when you look at like the role that he played. But, that happens at sometimes. Now, the last couple of years he's gotten it, it's been going back down. So if that maintains while Zach LaVine is still able to do some of the, complimentary facilitating that he does, you don't want him to be your facilitator. But if he can at times where he does have the ball, can move the ball well and catch diving players, and we're moving well without the ball, then yeah, that offense can go a little bit better. But I think that the safe bet is on Coby White leading the Chicago Bulls in scoring. Now, I don't know how many wins that's going to get us, right? And we've seen players put up points before, but their team not really excel, and we'll see if that is the case this season. And even if it doesn't, I'm not blaming that on Coby, right? I'm not saying that, if Coby scores 25 points but the Bulls are losing, it's all on Coby White. Not saying that at all, because it is a team game, and how the team comes together is just as important as anything else. But I'm just saying that, we'll see what the winning aspect of that is, and that really comes down to how all this comes together for the Chicago Bulls team this upcoming season. You guys know I've been vocal. I have my doubts. I have my questions. I have my things that I don't necessarily think are going to work the best for the Bulls. But, it is what it is, man. But, we'll see what comes down with that. At the end of the day, I hope that it does work out best for this team. But one of the things as well that's a huge question for this team is, how realistic is it that Zach LaVine actually does increase his trade value, right? And this is a fair question to be asked, because I look at it this way. There is more chances that Zach LaVine actually hurts his trade value than helps it. And the reason, and I've said this before, but I'll go into it in detail again, because it's been a long time since I've really gotten into the can Zach LaVine increase his trade value talk. But I look at it this way. I say that Zach LaVine, the one way that Zach LaVine can increase his trade value is he comes in, he plays well, he fits with the team. I guess it's more than one way, but it's like one scenario, right? He comes back to this team, he plays well, the team looks best when he's out there on the court, he fits in with the team. And I would even say this, Zach LaVine actually playing a complementary role to Coby White and to Josh Giddey to an extent will kind of maybe look at teams and say, hey, if he's willing to play complementary to those guys, we know that because most teams that are going to trade for Zach LaVine are trying to add him to maybe a star that they already have, right? Now, I'm not saying that necessarily is the best for the team. We'll see. And, the whole conversation around Zach LaVine and trying to talk about him as if he's like this trash player has gotten a bit overblown, in my opinion. It is what it is. The narrative always takes off in situations like this. And that's what's going to happen. Like, I'm not surprised by that. That's always going to happen in cases like this. The teams are going to tear players apart, and especially when you have the injury history, right? And so, while Zach LaVine, the injury history is a little bit overblown, he's played in 85% of the games that he's since he's become a Chicago Bull. The only thing is, and a big portion of that came out last season. If you take away the portion he missed last season, you're talking about a player that's closer to playing 90% of the games that he's since he's been a Chicago Bull. So you just got to look at that, right? But I think overall, when it comes down to it, that the scenarios that Zach LaVine could hurt his trade value outweigh the scenarios in which he can help his trade value. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to happen. I'm just saying that the way that I look at it is that those possibilities are higher. You look at the fact of if Zach LaVine suffers anything near an injury that keeps him out 15 or more games, that's definitely going to hurt it. You look at if Zach LaVine comes back to this team and doesn't fit in, teams are going to use that to say, well, hell, if you can't come in and fit in with this team that isn't even projected to be one of the better teams in the NBA, can you really fit into what we're doing here? And then it's not even though it's just on him, but they will use it. If the Bulls look worse while he's out there, whether he plays good or not, but the Bulls look worse out there and they're playing a losing style of basketball, people are going to blame that on Zach LaVine. So it's just, I think that that he can increase his trade value. And maybe regardless of any of that, there are teams that are GMs that look at it and say, hey, that Chicago situation, AK and Eversley are the GMs there. We don't think they're good at all. We're not going to worry about that. Let's go out. We need to add a score at the deadline. We got these expiring contracts of these players that definitely are part of our future. Let's go out and get Zach LaVine. There's definitely a chance of that happening. So I want to be clear here. In no way am I saying that any of these scenarios are more likely than the other. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't give a damn. Like, at the end of the day, I want what's best for the Bulls. And if the Bulls are still focused on trading Zach LaVine, but they don't want to give up assets to make it happen, they better hope damn well that Zach LaVine is coming back to the season, he's playing well, and he's staying healthy. If not, then you may have to be resigned to the fact that with 3 years and over $140 million left on Zach LaVine's deal, Zach may just be a Chicago Bull for the foreseeable future. We'll see. I still think that the most likely scenario is that the Bulls do try to find a trade partner for LaVine by the deadline. I still think that's the most likely scenario. But just because it's most likely, according to me, doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? That's what it all comes down to. Likely doesn't mean inevitable. And so we'll see what happens with it, right? We'll see. The Bulls have, they've lost on a lot of trades. A lot of Bulls fans look at it and say, this team has lost almost every trade that they've made in the long run, right? And even some, I don't look at the DeMar DeRozan like that necessarily, but I think it was the timing of when you gave up that asset because now he's gone and you've kind of gone younger and you can't necessarily try to, not to say that the Bulls would have, but you couldn't necessarily try to be, it's just, it's a lot of shit going on here in Chicago, to just be frank with you. So let me know down below, though. Do you think that it's likely that Zach LaVine increases his trade value, or do you think, like me, there are more scenarios in which Zach LaVine can hurt it more than help it? No right answer, no wrong answer. Just want to hear what you guys think on that down below. But let's get into the next topic that I want to talk about, is the 3-guard lineups. I talked about a voicemail that we got yesterday, or not a voicemail, it was a live call from Brandon Eljet, talking about this scenario with the Chicago Bulls and them using 3 guards. And honestly, it got my wheels turning. So I got to give a shout out to Brandon Eljet for really sparking my thought process on this 3-guard lineup type thing, right? And how well it could work, how well that it couldn't work. When you look at the history of the NBA, right, recently, of some of the 3-guard lineups that did or did not work, we can talk about it. In 2020-21, you had LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, and Devontae Graham. That lineup actually, when they were on the team or on the court, they had a point differential of plus 25.4, right? Now, that was another team that kind of had some balance there, but had some overlapping things, still had some shortcomings defensively, things like that. But overall, the team's point differential was negative 1.7. Then you look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chris Paul, and Dennis Schroeder, right? That was in 2019-20. That team played 850 possessions together, which the last lineup that I talked about with LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham, they only played 213 possessions together. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, 185 possessions together. In those 185 possessions, they had a point differential of plus 31.4 when they were on the court together. Now, I think that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an underrated defender. Personally, that's how I view it. Chris Paul is Chris Paul. Now, that was probably one of the last years of really, really good Chris Paul. Was solid Chris Paul. And Dennis Schroeder was always a solid player, right? Especially at that time. And that team had a point differential overall of plus 9.1. So that was one of the ones that, yeah, they scored a lot of points when they were on the court together, and overall the team had a positive point differential. Then we're going to go to 2018-19 with Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, and another Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That was with the Los Angeles Clippers. That team, that three-guard lineup played 292 possessions together and had a positive point differential of plus 4.8, and a positive team differential of plus 0.7. So again, another sign of positivity there. Pat Bev, definitely defense, an underrated shooter at times, right? Lou Will, we already know what Lou Will is as a scorer. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that would have been rookie Shai, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not surprising that there weren't a lot of possessions played between that. But again, showed that it could work. What you had there was linked with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, scoring with Lou Williams, and a solid facilitator and shooter in Patrick Beverley, and a really good defender, especially at that point in time. Then in 2014-15, you had Lou Williams, Grevis Vasquez, which I haven't said that name in so long, Grevis Vasquez, and Kyle Lowry. That three-guard lineup played 389 possessions together and had a positive point differential of 7.4 and a positive team differential of 3.5. So again, another sign of positivity there. Then one of my favorite three-guard lineups, you guys got to remember this, we're going deep into the bag here, 2014-15, and that was with Isaiah Thomas, Eric Bledsoe, and Goran Dragic. That team played 389 possessions together and had a positive point differential of plus 6.6 and a negative team differential of 0.2. So that's really what you're looking at. You're looking at some teams with the three-guard lineups that outperformed. They performed really well with those three-guard lineups, and you just can't deny it. Those are probably the best examples of that working. And so there is some history around the NBA of those three-guard lineups being able to work. Now, some of the finer details of that team, some of those teams had really good and solid bigs. Some of them had really complementary defenders around them. So even a three-guard lineup working really has to come down as well to how the team you have around them helps support the fact that you're running three guards out there at one time. And that's the question that we don't really know for the Chicago Bulls yet, right? Three-guard lineups sometimes get beat off dribble. You don't have a shot-blocking big in Nikola Vucevic there at all, right? So you don't have that. Patrick Williams is a solid defender as well. So, hopefully you're hoping that Patrick Williams' defense and his switchability can help a lot in that. But it's still a big question mark. There's not a lot to say the three-guard lineups are this thing that's just going to holistically work for every single team. It comes down to who do you have in that. Now, another really good three-guard lineup that is historical, we're going deep into the bag here, 2006, 2007, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Bruce Bowen. Now, that was another team that overall had a three-guard lineup. I think people don't remember that Bruce Bowen was a guard, but Bowen's defensive ability that he had there really helped that three-guard lineup work at the optimum, because you had Bruce Bowen being a player that had extreme versatility in the way that he was able to defend, and you can't overlook that at all. So, again, having one of those guys be defenders is a big part of this working as well, and we haven't really seen that. Another one going deep into the bag, one of my favorite three-guard lineups, especially the playoff run that they went into, was Baron Davis, Monte Ellis, and Jason Richardson, the 2006-07 Golden State Warriors, the We Believe Warriors. Now, that team was all offense. And you look at it, and, they had a great run in the Western Conference quarterfinals, against the Dallas Mavericks at that time. And they worked so well together because at the end of the day, none of those players had a specific role. They all did a little bit of things. They all did some ball handling. They all ran the offense at times. Jason Richardson much less, but they both, between Monte Ellis and Baron Davis, both shared point guard duties at times as well. So again, there is some history of this work, and the question is will the Bulls be able to be the next team where a 3-guard lineup can work at a high level for the team? And I say it comes down to how the pieces fit together. Josh Giddey, how well is that rebounding and playmaking, helping this team get out in transition, getting easier buckets, and those type of things. Coby White, how do you grow as a scorer now? Because you were the point guard. You had a lot of the ball handling duties, and I still think he's going to have a nice amount of those. But now that you're going to have the ball in your hands, theoretically less, how do you grow as an off-ball scorer, right? That's something that Coby White has to grow in. And with Zach LaVine, it comes into buying into the system, because I do think that Zach LaVine and Giddey could work together. But all three of these guys working together, it's going to take all guys to sacrifice to a degree, all guys to grow their games in aspects that they maybe haven't done the best before. And that's going to be a thing that it's going to be fun and interesting to watch. I'm excited to see if this lineup can work. I'm not saying that it will. I'm not going to necessarily say it just adamantly won't. It really comes down to coaching is a big part of it, and that's a big part why a lot of people have a lot of doubt about it as well, admittedly. And it's also going to come down to how these guys and the team around them also support it, and also your backup guards, right? In Ayo Dosunmu being that third guard, I guess fourth guard in this case, because your other three guards are starting, but how Ayo Dosunmu as a guard, when he's asked to be more of a point, when he's asked to be more of a 2, even if he plays some 3 in a case like this. And then, Lonzo, even though as a player that I'm not expecting a whole lot from Lonzo next year as far as games played, right, or minutes played, but in the minutes that he does play, if he gets on the court, he's another important aspect of kind of making this thing work. So let me know down below. In hearing and going over some of the 3-guard lineups that have worked in the NBA, what does that make you feel about the Bulls 3-guard lineup, and if it could work here? Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.